Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the 286 Project with me, Chris Akers. And on this podcast, we talk about art, culture, politics and sport, and anything else we can think of. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Dave Harris, who is part of the Ringside Charitable Trust. Hi, Dave. How are things?
Hi, Chris. Yep, not too bad at all. Things are moving in the right direction.
That's good. That's good to know. Before we get into what the Ringside Charitable Trust are doing currently, can you just explain who you are? What is your background in boxing? Because this is a boxing centric episode in many ways. And how did you come to found the Ringside Charitable Trust?
Right. Well, I've been in boxing all my life, from boxing as a youngster through to managing, promoting, and being involved in the sport I love. I become the chairman of the British Boxing Hall of Fame in 2015, which has grown. It's grown so big. It's the most prestigious award now in Britain for boxers. And from that, I met a number of former boxers who were, to say I was shocked would be an understatement, who were suffering from pugilistic dementia, mental illness, alcohol abuse. And I looked into it in more depth, worked quite closely with Trish Dixon, who brought a book out called Damage, which I think is the finest book on the truth about our sport. He went right across America, met all the biggest names in boxing that were suffering from pugilistic dementia, which was nearly all the heavyweights of the 80s. He spoke to people like Mickey Ward, that's also suffering now. As most people remember, Ward Gatti trilogy, there was, but Mickey's now suffering. Aaron Pryor suffered. There's so many of them. But the one that had the biggest effect on me was one of the nicest people you could ever meet in boxing, was Johnny Clark, who was the former British European bantamweight champion. And he was in a home quite close to where I live, where they were caring, but the support that he needed. And when I used to take him out of the home to EBA meetings, he would come alive because he remembered the past. But in this home, he never really wanted to go back to it, and would hold my hand and say, "Dave, I don't want to, can I come home with you?" and things like that. And it was tragic. So that was where I got the idea, let's get a home opened. They've got homes open for jockeys. The horse racing industry look after their own. Every jockey pays a percentage when they race to the Jockey Foundation Fund. So their home is a state-of-the-art one. They look after their own. But British boxing has failed dismally to do the same job. I've attempted to get most of the leading promoters on board, or I tried to get all of the leading promoters on board. And now for the first time, there is a new promoter on the block, Ben Shalom of Sky, who seems to me to have a totally different attitude, where the other promoters probably see showing that there is a need for a home isn't good for their business. Ben Shalom, who is an extremely intelligent young man, does see that clearly that there is a problem and that he feels a duty of care. So I have a meeting coming up with him fairly soon, where we're going to sit down and we're going to discuss how he's already said to me face to face, "Dave, I want to help." So it's a positive step forward. And Chris, I'll let you know when the time comes. I mean, you're one of the first from the podcasts I do to actually know that this meeting is going to take place, which could have huge future implications for the sport. But it will mean that we've got over 100 boxers who need either respite care or residential care already. And I could tell you stories that would absolutely break your heart, really, if you have the same love of boxing that I have. You've got people like Bunny Sterling, who his wife tried to get him in a home. She tried 40 different homes before she had it, and not his wife, sorry, his daughter, before they had any success. He was so frustrated that obviously he was suffering from dementia. Not that I'm not 100% sure, but I think it would have been pugilistic dementia or vascular dementia. It would definitely have been vascular dementia. He had pulled a huge chunk of hair from his head in frustration, which had cleared where you could actually see the skull underneath it. And his daughter, she was a lovely lass, or is a lovely person. She took a picture of it and showed me this picture. And I thought, why is it that our industry doesn't look after our own? A few years ago, spoke to Robert Smith of the Border Control, who runs, for the small amount of people that he's got, runs a very efficient service for boxers who are boxing today. And their health scheme and everything they do for boxers who are active is first class, with all the different schemes they have in place, and the fact that boxers have to have CT scans on their brains before they fight, etc., etc. It's a good setup, but they do nothing and haven't, in their eyes, got the workforce to be able to set up anything for a duty of care for boxers in need. As I said, the race people do. I offered, or our trustees, and I'm chairman of Ringside Charitable Trust, we've got some first-class trustees who work very, very hard for the trust. We come up with an idea. We said, look, let's try a pilot project with the board. We will pay for a year's staffing to set up a system where boxers who earn over 50,000 or 100,000 pay 1%. When it gets over £200,000 to £1 million, they pay 0.5%. We could come up with a system. That's just figures that are thrown into the pot. It could have brought in a considerable amount of money, and it wouldn't have affected the boxers because it would have been tax deductible. And for such a small percentage, they wouldn't have even known really that it wouldn't have affected them at all. And yet the board said that they felt they took too much money off the boxers at that time. I'm hoping they'll re-look at this, but the best thing that's happening is the fact that we've got somebody like Ben Shalom of Boxer and Sky who are actively looking to support what we're doing and to be the first ones to really show a duty of care.
Okay, so
I think that's given you the...
Yeah. It's really good. So there's a lot of questions I'd like to ask. The first thing is, before we get back to the board, in terms of what's obviously now commonly known as CET, and back in the day was pugilistic dementia, what's the difference in regards to how it's considered now? Like when you started boxing, was it almost considered as a occupational hazard, or was it taken more seriously, like compared to now, so to speak? Was it just one of the things where, oh, for a world champion is something you might get in the future, and it's almost dismissed?
Right. When I was first boxing, we knew about. I mean, I'm into my mid-70s now, so when I was boxing, yes, we'd heard of it, but it wasn't really spoken about. It's taken people like Trish Dixon and a professor in America, and I can't quite remember his name at the moment. In the 30s, he tried to set up a home. He had done a considerable amount of work looking at pugilistic dementia in boxers in America, going back to the old time fighters like August and Gaines and people like that. And he clearly said there was a problem, but nobody done anything about it. So he, on his own, tried to sort out the problem. He contacted all the different commissions in the States. And what's very interesting is he got a very similar attitude from these people as I've had from the other leading promoters in this country. In fact, total silence. They feel that rather than speak about it, don't say a word. Mm-hmm. And it's a very powerful argument not to say a word, to just keep quiet, because how can you have a constructive discussion if the people who you should be discussing it with don't want to know?
Yeah, indeed. It's and again, you see other sports as well, like with American football. I can't remember the doctor's name who looked into it in terms of American footballers, and the teams were like, no, because this could affect the bottom line, so to speak. And that kind of gets me to the British board, because unlike a lot of governing bodies, they may not have a lot of money, and you listed it there in like your first answer, but what else are they trying to do with regards to boxers' health, and how's your relationship been with them in regards to setting up, like in terms of helping boxers through your trust?
Right, I think I have a lot of respect for the British Boxing Board of Control for their everyday running of our sport. They probably got the most difficult job that anybody could ever have. They're not big enough. They're not powerful enough. The tail has wagged the dog for many, many years. Everybody knows it. It's not the board's fault. They just haven't had that extra financial security to be able to stand strong at times. I mean, you can look at the examples that are going on at the moment in boxing. It's clear that they haven't got the strength. That's in my opinion. They just haven't got the strength to deal with the situations that are arising now. And another example, you've got some of these famous boxers. They are bringing boxing into disrepute because they are effing and jeffing on YouTube, etc. They're not acting, in my opinion, in a very professional manner. They're doing boxing great harm. They should be seen as role models for young people. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things wrong with boxing, and there is a nasty smell around the whole of our sport. And I'm not the only one that's got the courage to speak up about it. You know, you've got lots of good people in boxing that are standing strong and saying this is not good enough. But the voice is not strong enough, Chris. It's just not strong enough.
Okay, yeah. No, I completely agree with a lot of what you're saying. And just thinking of the care with regards to what happens with boxers at the moment. I mean, I've worked in care before and whatnot, and I'm just wondering if, say, a boxer is diagnosed or suspected to have like mental and physical disabilities because of their boxing, do the board do what you call referral process, i.e. they go to the board and say, or a relative goes to the board and says, I think my relative who boxed for many years is struggling with the boxing. Do the board help them in regards to referring them to hospitals or anything like that?
No, not that I know of. They do have a financial system, which is very small, where they can offer amounts like £500 to those that are struggling financially. they haven't got the manpower to be able to do what should be done. The duty of care, I mean, Robert Smith and I have clashed at times over it, but I do respect the man and the role that he has. He's got probably the most difficult role in sport, and that's saying something. But it's very difficult when you've got 8 people, I think, working for the Board of Control, where some of these other promotional organisations have one heck of a lot more people involved, especially in the media side. So I think I've gone off what you were saying, really. What else can the board do? Well, in my opinion, the board could work closely with people like Ringside Charitable Trust. I mean, they gave us £5,000 18 months ago, I think, towards what we were doing. But that's really, as you know, Chris, if you've been in the care world, we know how much it costs to run a home. It approximately will cost, and that's my background too. I was a social worker for over 27 years, so I have an understanding of being involved. I was a principal officer in social services, so I do have a good understanding of the cost set up. So we completely, I looked into it. We worked out all the costings for a home, which comes approximately to just 1.2 million a year to run it in a reasonably first-class style, almost state-of-the-art, with good quality staff for a 36-bedded unit. We needed to buy the home approximately 2 million. For 5 years, we've been working hard. We've had people scaling down the Spinnaker at Portsmouth, raising money, ex-boxers jumping out of planes 3 miles up, and active boxers have done it for us too. We walked over hot coals, and 2 of the trustees, myself and 1 other, also walked over the hot coals. And believe you me, that's not something that you just do for the fun of it, really. Johnny Nelson was there, and he said, somebody said, "John, are you doing it?" He went, "Not lightly." but John is an ambassador for Ringside Charitable Trust. We've got some great ambassadors: John Conti, Duke McKenzie, Robbie Regan, and countless ones. Jimmy Batten, who also is suffering from slight dementia. He's fighting it every inch of the way. I mean, he went 10 rounds with Roberto Duran, even though at that time it was said that he did already have brain damage, and yet they allowed him to fight in America and go 10 rounds with Duran. Now, these are things that should not have been allowed to happen.
Yeah, isn't that part of the problem as well? Like, unlike other sports which have one encompassing governing body, especially when it comes to health, there's different, not just different countries, but even different states have different stipulations in regards to what classes as a healthy boxer.
Oh yes. Oh, there's some. I mean, we're fortunate in this country with a Board of Control that do have good rules and really look after boxers that are active. An example being, if there's drug problems, they do deal with it as best they can. The only problem that the board, I think, have, and this is in my opinion, is that they haven't got, it all gets down to the power brokers in our sport being able to bring in lawyers all the time. Example being, if you look at young Conor Benn, wouldn't it have been better if he'd have just gone to the Board of Control and said, "I don't know what's happened. I really haven't done anything wrong, but something's got in my system. I don't know what," and be upfront about it. But no, it all gets tied up with lawyers and made such a big thing of. I'm not saying who's right and who's wrong in this, because I don't know enough about what went on with either the board or that his promotional setup. So I haven't got a clue really, apart from thinking that it's tragic that big business gets involved with a sport that should have more clarity, and the Board of Control should have a lot more power.
Yeah, indeed, they should. In regards to the makeup of the trust, then you talked about ambassadors. Yep. Who's on the main board? Obviously, you're on it, but who else makes up the main board?
Right. Paul Fairweather, who is their treasurer, who works hard. He runs their Facebook page. I don't know whether you've seen it. You've seen that. Karen Knight, who is our secretary. She's married to Terry Knight, former professional boxer, and she is a very intelligent lady that we've got on board there as our secretary. We're very lucky. Johnny Oliver, who used to in the early days train Derek Chikora and Anthony Joshua when he first started, I think, before Sean Murphy become more involved. We've got Tommy Berlin, who is a businessman and runs the Essex ex-boxers and a former professional boxer. And we've got Bob Edgeworth, who's the former British Boxing Board of Control timekeeper, who is, again, a former accountant before he retired, and another extremely efficient person. That's our trustee team.
Okay, and in regards to, because you talked about the board not having enough money and so on, and obviously you do a lot of events, charitable events to try and raise money for your cause. What other ways are you trying to find funds? Is there like any grants there that could help, or what other ways are you trying to get money in to help grow like the trust and help like build this home?
It's one of the toughest things that you can do. We looked at lottery funding, and we spoke to a person that was quite high up in the lottery and said, your chances of getting anything through the lottery are very, very slight indeed. And you will go through more hoops than you would probably wish to do. And there may be other ways. Early on, we were involved with, we were promised help by big business in London who come to our first meeting. I won't mention names, but because nothing happened from it, really. We didn't get any. They offered real support and it didn't come across. We've really paddled our own boat, to be honest with you. We've got Andrew Fairley, a remarkable young man who he's now doing a ring walk, a wing walk on a plane with two friends of his. It's costing them quite a bit of money to do it, and they're going to hopefully that people in boxing will get behind them to support that. We started something 2 years ago to say, look, people in boxing who see our Facebook page or our website, please give £5 a month so that we can have regular income coming in so that we can build on that. Well, sadly, we've never received more than, I think we've got about 80 people who pay £5 a month, which we need 1,000 people or 2,000 people paying £5 a month. I mean, it's the price of a pint of beer. And if you love your sport of boxing, and I just don't understand, we could have easily given up.
Yeah.
Because we've been knocked from pillar to post. And without the support of the people, the power brokers in the industry, we found it very hard. But we've continued. We've been like a dog with a bone, really. We don't let go. We will not give up. We had a song that I don't know whether you've heard it, but called "Never Give Up, Never Give In." It's on, I think, Alexa, Amazon, whatever it is. You can get it. It's called "Never Give Up, Never Give In" by the Fighting Legends. It's a brilliant song. We went to Britain's Got Talent. We got 4 votes, a standing ovation from the judges. The whole of the Palladium stood to the champions that sung. It's a lovely song. It's worth listening to, Chris. You want to listen to it later. It's a lovely song. It's quite inspiring. Written by Simon Block, who was the General Secretary of the Border Control, and then was Commonwealth Secretary. Simon, it's a brilliant song that he wrote and produced. We didn't get through. There were 3 charities. Although we got the standing ovation from everybody on the day, sadly there were 3 other charities, and one of those went through because they have so many that apply to go on Britain's Got Talent. It's a shame because that would have given us the exposure that we needed.
Mm-hmm. You said before about the jockeys like looking after their own. I know they're kind of completely different sports and in many ways completely different class of people that attend each sport. But I'm just wondering, has anyone, either yourself or anyone else on the board, reached out to them and just say, what ways do you help your own as a way of possibly you can transfer to the Ringside Charitable Trust?
Well, it's interesting you say that. Just only this morning, I had a phone call from Naomi Murphy, who is a clinical psychologist who works with sportsmen, football, many of them that are in prison for various things. She's spoken at when we had a national press conference. She came and spoke on it. She's a remarkable lady who genuinely cares for what we're trying to do. And I had a message from her this morning to say the PPF, the Professional Football Foundation, I think is it, or Football Association, whatever. She said, they are looking now to open a home. She's got this information from somewhere. She said, what do you think about going into a joint home with the PFA? And I texted her back and said, we will look at anything, but at the moment, I would prefer that boxers are with boxers rather than general sports people. Now, from what I hear, the Professional Football Association has £58 million in their foundation.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money. Now, they could do that standing on their head with people like me that have an understanding of how to set up a home. Boxing has the opportunity, and I'm not getting any younger. I'd like to see all this set up within the next 2 years. And that's the sort of conversation I'll be having with Ben Shalom, because Ben is probably our best hope of if we can get Ben on board with Sky, then to look at boxing in a different way, not to look at it as though let's sweep it under the carpet, but we do have a problem. Let's address the problem. Let's be the leading leader in boxing throughout the world. Let's set this home up now. We all know that there's a problem. You can't sweep it under the carpet. Mm-hmm. We've got to do something about it. So let's do it.
Are there any equivalents to the Ringside Charitable Trust abroad? So is anything like that in, say, America or Australia, where something similar, where there's a care home for boxers that you know of? There
isn't a care home for boxers in America. There is one or two, and I'm sorry, I haven't got his name on top of my head at the moment, but there is a guy in the States that is trying to get something going as a support mechanism for boxers who are suffering. And when you see the amount of boxers that have ended up with pugilistic dementia, it's frightening. Mm-hmm. And when you see that we've got 100 in this country that need help, we've had phone calls. We've got a helpline, Chris, that we run 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year. with ex-boxers manning those lines for when people need support or help. Now, at least that gives them somewhere for someone to speak to about their problem. But it doesn't really address the problem, because all we can do is pass them on to the appropriate people that they need to speak to for whatever the problem is, whether it's alcohol abuse or mental illness. Because a lot of boxers, when they retire, like other sports, they're left in limbo. They don't really know what to do. They've been training hard, they've been focused, then all of a sudden it's ended. And this is where the problems come in. Example is, we've just lost probably one of the greatest boxers this country ever had in Ken Buchanan. Ken, I met on many, many occasions, and his best friends, which was Phil Jones, sadly, who's passed away about 6 months ago, and Jock, who is probably was one of Ken's greatest friends in Scotland, and Jock's got an MBE for services to charities. He's come on board with Ringside. He's been supportive, but the one thing that comes through that we all understood, Ken had a drink problem. When Ken retired, there were too many people to slap him on the back and say, "Come on, Ken," and they take him into a pub, probably buy his beers, because at the time, I think Ken had lost a lot of his money through ill-advised business setups. And of course, he went down the slippery slope. Luckily, he had some good friends around him, because Ken was a really lovely guy. He was a smashing, always gave time to young people. A dour, true Scotsman, really, but he was a lovely man. And that's somebody who's famous. You've got people who are struggling, like Lloyd Hannigan, who fought Don Curry, went to America, took the world title off of Curry, who was meant to be at the time pound for pound the best. He's now in a home. He finds it difficult to walk. So there's a lot of sadness in our sport, and we want to address it, but we can only address it if everybody gets on board. To think that we ask people to pay £5 a month, even if they've done it for 2 years, to give up a pint of beer a month, to help those that have given them so much excitement. The other thing is, Chris, we don't want to change boxing. We're not here to say, "Oh, let's ban it, let's do this, let's do that." We love our sport. We know the risks, but look after those that slip through the net, and they're not being looked after. And it's we come out with a thing, one voice, when we started, because it was one voice. It was just the one voice of Ringside Charitable Trust. And that one voice is still really the only strong voice, although we've got some great ex-boxers on board now. I think we've got about 20 really committed ambassadors, and household names of the past.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good to know. And it's interesting you talked about boxers, like in other sports, when they retire, because they've been such regimented environment for so long, they struggle to know what to do next. Is that something you would like to see the Ringside Charitable Trust, or even the British Boxing Board of Control, help with in the future? I.e., you can do help with like certain courses in case that when you retire, you've got something else to go into. So, for example, if you're, say, a boxer who's just fought at British level, won British titles, etc., but then you don't know what to do after you've retired, would it be like a good scheme such as putting them on courses like just before the due to tie, like carpentry courses and courses for
Also,
electricians and that, because that would help them at least think about the future and help them prepare for it.
I think that would be wonderful, but it's a bit like step at a time, Chris.
Yeah.
Our main course of action is to work 24 hours a day if necessary. And I believe you me, sometimes I'm up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm working harder now than when I worked. And so are the other trustees. They do a considerable amount of work to try and make this get over the line. But all these things are necessary. But who's going to do them? At the moment, if we can get the home up and running, first of all, then we, as the Ringside Charitable Trust, will look at working with, to be what you just said is absolutely what's needed. They do need to learn trades because many of them turn pro at 20, probably have been on the building sites or hadn't learned to trade. And then they've nothing. I mean, I've had former British champions crying on the phone. I've had their wives upset because some of them have, in their early 40s, have got already suffering from early pugilistic dementia, which means that they're turning on their own. They're making statements about their wives having affairs, which is not true. But the paranoia sets in with, as you know, with dementia. I mean, it's a terrible thing. And to see people suffering with paranoia is one of the most heartbreaking things you can ever see. Mm-hmm. And because of my background, similar to probably yours, I've seen these things and it's not nice, it's not pleasant. But when our own governing body and the power brokers do not have their duty of care or do not do their duty of care, this is why we've got such a big problem. It seems to me that all the time boxers can make people money, and I'm sure they're looked after financially, and most of the promoters today do look after their boxers and they get well paid for what they do in most cases. But it's not about when they're boxing. All these promoters know there is collateral damage and they do not want to know. They think it would harm their business to say, yes, we do have a problem. But the only one, and I say this in his, well, I'm so impressed by him. It seems to me that he is the first one to say, yes, I accept there's a problem. Yes, and I want to do something to be positive and do something about it. And I'm looking forward to meeting with Ben Sharon, and let's change history. Let's make boxing in this country a world leader. Let's just let it die out. I mean, I think I've probably got two years left of being able to work really hard at this. Yeah. I still continue, but there is a time when age obviously takes its toll. And I wished I was 10, 15 years younger. I'm not. But we have on April the 23rd, we're doing a fundraiser here down on the South Coast, where we have got all the champions and ambassadors coming along. The show's a sellout. It's not the venue that we originally had, unfortunately. That venue went to the High Court and was closed, even though that they'd already agreed their date. But that's life. We got another venue, smaller, but we've sold it out. So we will raise more money on this day with auctions and raffles, and we've got Matt Christie, who is a great supporter of Ringside Charitable Trust. He's the guest speaker for the day. And when you've got people like Trish Dixon, who we're standing shoulder to shoulder together. Trish's knowledge of dementia is exceptional with boxers, and he has been in the homes of people like Liam Spinks and spoken to his wife and spoken to him and seeing how that dementia has affected their family. So many, Ken Norton, boxers, even Ali had some form of dementia near the end. And who knows what caused all his different illnesses that he had. And there's so many of them. I mean, he got close to people like Aaron Pryor and Aaron Pryor's wife, and saw what she went through. And there's so many others. The big names of the 80s that have fallen by the wayside. One of the few that seems to have come through is George Foreman. I mean, he's still as sharp as a tack. But so many of the others of big names, some of the biggest names in boxing, the Thomas Hearnses of this world, they're struggling. They're struggling, and they shouldn't be struggling. There should be help for them. And that's America as well as Britain. But I can only try my best for this country. And that's what I'm trying to do, is to make boxing a world leader in looking after its own, Chris.
How, obviously, with your background in care, being a social worker, how much help have you had from the actual care sector itself, as opposed to just with boxers? Has anyone come forward from there saying, we may be able to help you in any way, or have you managed to reach out and they've accepted your invitation?
No, there's the care system in our country is basically, what we're trying to do is have a place which is a state-of-the-art home for boxers so that they can be with their own. There are so many boxers in care homes all over this country who people don't even know they are. I mean, I'll give you an example. If Johnny Clark had been in a home for boxers, I think he would have absolutely enjoyed his last years, because although he had dementia, he could remember the past. A lot of what I don't have a great knowledge on, and I don't think anybody apart Trish might have a bit better understanding than most of us, that many people suffering from pugilistic dementia can remember parts of the past, their old days, and they come alive. I've watched and spent time talking to so many of them, and particularly Johnny Clark, because I was very close to John, and see his eyes light up. When they closed Manor Place Baths down, he was the star of the show. Essex CBA put this big day on up in London, and I took John up, and without knowing it, his picture of his in boxing stance was on the front cover of the magazine that they produced. And when John went up there, people were coming up asking. There were a line of 30 or 40 people waiting for his signature, and he came alive, and he was talking about his boxing career and his past. Bits of it were coming through, and this man, you could see his eyes were alight. And I want to see that for all these boxers, that their eyes are dull, and nobody's actually doing anything much for them. We're going to have all the care workers in this home will have a unique understanding of the career of every boxer that is in their care. That's what I want. It's going to be a state-of-the-art support system where they can watch their old fight films, they can talk at a non-alcoholic bar at night, sit down and chat together. Hopefully, one group that really did give us support was Brinsworth House, the actors' home.
Oh, yeah.
In the early days, they gave me a lot of support and knowledge of what they were doing, and of course they've got the funding from the Variety Club. We haven't got funding from anybody, and it's tragic. It's a disgrace. And a lot of people say, well, why do you bother? Why don't you just say, well, I've tried, forget it. But that's not the way in life. If you just keep going, you don't pack up, you fight harder. And that's what we're doing, because we're fighting for people, Chris, that haven't got a voice. You know, they're alone. They're alone in their own world, and we've got to do something about it, because they've done so much, given us so many exciting nights. I mean, I love to see. I watched the other day on YouTube, Dwight Braxton versus Evander Holyfield. Yeah. I think his name become Mohammed Quarry, something like that, wasn't it? What a fight! Mm. But where was their support when they needed it later? I think Holyfield's reasonably okay still, but I think Dwight Braxton isn't quite as well as he was. As far as I know, I think he's struggling. I don't know too much about what happened there, but to see the punches he took through his career, and there are boxers who are boxing today, Chris, that shouldn't be boxing now, but they love the glory of it. So who can stop them? But they are warriors, and they're going to do it. But at the end of the day, the border control should be stronger and say, no, enough's enough. We're concerned for your future. We will not give you a license in this country. And these other commissions should be stronger. So unless we speak up, nothing will ever be done.
Yeah, it's you mentioned Matt Christie there, and I've seen him writing boxing news about the Ringside Charitable Trust. And obviously you mentioned Trish Dixon, and I know you were on his podcast a while ago talking about the Ringside Charitable Trust. What other media outlets have you been on to discuss this? Have any of them actually reached out to you to discuss not only what you're trying to do, but the actual problem of what boxers suffer?
Right. This is where it's so frustrating. About 8 or 9 months ago, I called a national press conference. The border control came. Jerome Pels of the England Boxing attended. But not one senior. Matt Christie was there, and obviously Trish Dixon, but not one of the only one that gave his who's a lovely guy, Chris McKenna of the Star. He's been very supportive, and he was up in Manchester and was having to do something else that day, so couldn't make it. But not one other press person attended that press conference. Not all the promoters were invited, and I understand why Ben Shalom didn't come, because on that same day or on the day after, I think he was already working on his own press conference for one of the big fights coming up that they had. But we didn't get apologies. It's the wall of silence, Chris, that really is quite frustrating and sad. It's sad for those that deserve better. So to put it in a nutshell, no, because none of them want to upset the promoters. That's their bread and butter, isn't it? You've got people like Matt Christie that are unique. To be honest with you, they're principled, love boxing, and they're principled, just like Trish. We love our sport. We're not wanting to cause any problems to the sport. What we want to do is to make it the most boxing, the leading light in the world, how we look after our own. But if you can't get the press to turn up, because obviously if they turn up and then start speaking about Ringside Charitable Trust, the promoters are going to start saying, well, we're not going to give you our I mean, that's my impression of it anyway. That's my opinion of it. So that's what I think they've got to look after their own bags.
Okay. So you said you want to give this, obviously, you said 1 or 2 years before you have to basically reduce the hours you're working currently. What would you like to achieve in this couple of years? You talked about the home, but what else would you like the trust to achieve in that time? And actually, not just the trust, in terms of just boxers' health, what would you like how would you like the board to do with boxers' health for the next couple of years?
Right. In the next 2 years, my whole energy will go into getting this home up and running. I've got to be focused on that and nothing else, because that is what's needed so desperately, Chris. So I would love to say, yeah, I can do all these things. I'm not Superman. I'm just an ordinary guy that's wants to see something be achieved for those boxers that I love. I love the sport. I love the ex-boxers. I mean, people like the Duke Mackenzies of this world, they're lovely people, absolutely wonderful people that care, that they're committed to helping those that are not as fortunate as what they are. You know, the Derek Williamses of this world, you know, big Derek Williams, a wonderful ambassador for Ringside. We've been very lucky. We've been very lucky, and John Conti has been there. He came to the very first meeting that I put together at the Boxing News offices. That was 5 years ago. And as Matt Christie said, he said, Dave, I thought it was a walk in the park. They'd all get behind your idea and we'd have the home up and running, and boxing would be in this country seen as the leading light in the world. And he's, like me, saddened that it's not happened.
Yeah.
But I will keep going. I did at the Border Control. I was approached by Gareth A. Davis, who said, Dave, I want you on Talk Sport. So I just said to him, yeah, I've heard these things before, because that is a good medium for us to be on. And he said, I promise you. So who knows? That was 3 weeks ago. I haven't heard from him since. Probably, who knows? He may have spoken to the powers that be and they've said, oh, no, don't go down that route. I don't know. That's my surmising. Yeah. I don't know. But I feel that until they wake up and smell the coffee, we're not going to get anywhere, apart from the fact we've got one chink in the curtain, and that's Ben Shalom. And I'm really hoping he seems to have a different attitude. And I'm, please God, he's with us.
Okay. Dave, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you about the work you're doing. Much respect to you and the people behind the trust. If people want any more information about the trust, and also if there's any way that they can donate, how do they go about that?
Right. If people want to donate £5 a month, 2 coffees or a pint of beer, although I guess beer's getting dearer these days in lots of places, to contact our Facebook page or our website, and contact Paul Fairweather, and he will set up the monthly payments for people. It's quite an easy thing to do, and that £5 will show that whoever it is stands shoulder to shoulder with us to make this home become a reality. And every little bit helps. Yeah. So, but Chris, thanks for inviting me on to your podcast, and I hope it will generate a lot of feeling from people that watch it.
I mean, I hope so too. And what I'm going to do in the description, because this would be on YouTube and Spotify. So in the description for YouTube, I'll put all the information that you've mentioned about the Ringside Charitable Trust. So the link to your website and also the link to your Facebook page as well. But as I say, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And I really sincerely hope that you do get a care home for boxers up and running, because for the sacrifices they make, they give us such entertainment, and it'd be nice to give something back.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I 100% agree with you.
Oh, cool.
And enjoy the rest of the day.
All right, will do. You take care of yourself.
Bye for now, Chris, and thank you.
Yeah.